Thank you so much for being part of this project. If you don't mind introducing yourself and your title.
Sure. Aya cheke ewe makeke, newe tawins weane, meow meow tawenge, Nichole wins weane, akala shamat tawenge, nila meow meow. Hello, all my relatives. My name is Nichole Prescott in English. My traditional name is Neweta, which means she speaks, and I am a citizen of the Miami Nation of Oklahoma. I'm also the Assistant Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs at the University of Texas System in Austin, Texas.
That's the coolest introduction anyone has ever given. So I always like to start at the beginning. Where did you grow up?
Well, I was born in an Indian hospital in Claremore, Oklahoma, which was the nearest Indian hospital to where our town is, which is Miami, Oklahoma, which is named after my tribe. There are 9 tribes headquartered there, and we got to name the town. But I grew up on the Mexico-Texas border in a little town called San Felipe del Rio. Short is just Del Rio. And it was a tiny little town of maybe about 30,000, which might not seem tiny for some people, but in Texas, it felt pretty tiny. So I grew up there, and then I moved to Austin to go to undergrad at UT Austin. And then I moved and got my master's degree in Oxford, Ohio at Miami University, which is also named after my tribe. Those were our original hunting lands, homelands, and we have a really unique relationship with them now. And then I moved to New York and got my PhD, and then of course I moved back to Austin. So here I am.
So when you were growing up, what emphasis was placed on your education or education in general?
So my parents did not get degrees, higher education degrees, although they did take some courses at the local junior college in Miami, Oklahoma. So they always put it into my head that I will go to college. It was never a question. I loved school. I can't say that I was great at it always. Like I wasn't the person who was always taking home books, and wasn't the person who was, always making straight A's, although I made really good grades. I was very interested in learning and interested in the content, so I always paid attention. And so it was just a given that I was going to go to college, but that wasn't the same for my siblings. So there's about a 13-year gap between me and my siblings, who are much older. But by the time I came along, I was going to go to college, and I did.
And so you go to your undergrad. What do you end up getting your degree in?
My bachelor's was in history, with a minor in English literature.
So what were you thinking you were going to do when you graduated?
Well, when I started college, I thought I was going to become a journalist, because I had worked at the Del Rio News Herald as a staff writer when I was like 17. I remember I graduated high school and I got my job there, and I loved it. I love writing. I still write in a variety of magazines and articles of varying kinds. So that's what I thought I wanted to do. And then I took my first journalism class, and I was like, I hate how you have to write for journalism. So I had never been taught that, but I didn't enjoy that kind of writing. And then I went into history because I just love history. So did I know what I was going to do with that? No. When I got out of college, I was managing a restaurant and booking music at that restaurant. I live in Austin, the live music capital of the world. And I had no idea what I was going to do with my degree until, an event happened in my life, which I can talk about, that really kind of changed the trajectory of where I ended up.
So how much time between when you graduate with your undergrad and you go to get your master's?
3 years. So, and I did a lot of things. I did some traveling during that time. And that is when I was trying to take some correspondence courses. That's what we called them back in the day, where UT Austin sent me a binder to read through, and I, had to do it that way. So I never really stopped trying to learn. I just, didn't know where I was headed with that. During that time, I also started getting super involved in my tribe in our language and cultural revitalization efforts. And so I was going up to Miami, Oklahoma, which is about an 8 to 10 hour drive from Austin, Texas, depending on traffic and a variety of other things. And I was learning to be a teacher of our language. So I was up there taking language courses and really trying to learn it well enough so that I could share that with other people.
Okay. When you go do you pick your masters because of the relation to your tribe, or do you just happen to end up there?
So here's that story that really changed the trajectory of my life. Because I was going up to Miami a lot more and doing language courses and kind of getting a lot more involved. I'd always gone up there, but it's different when you are, you've graduated college, you're going up there, you're kind of participating on your own, kind of from your own desire to do that versus always going up with your parents. And during one of the visits, I met someone from Miami University. I'd never heard of it. I was like, oh, how cool. They're named after our tribe. And what I didn't realize is we'd been forming a closer and closer relationship with Miami University. And they were looking for folks to go. It never occurred to me that it might be me, because I was like, I already have a degree. So, I can't afford to go do another college degree. And what am I going to do with that anyway? So I went home, and then one night, I remember this very clearly. I can see it in my mind. I can see how my bedroom was arranged. I could see the light. I could see me sitting on the edge of the bed when my chief called me, Chief Leonard Akima. He called me and said, Nichole, we want you to go to graduate school. And I said, Chief, people like me don't go to graduate school. He said, no, we need you to go to graduate school, and you need to come back and serve our community. And I was like, I don't even know how to do that. I don't know how to go to graduate school. And so he said, I'm going to have somebody from Miami University call you. And I know you made good grades, so I don't think there's going to be a problem. So Miami University called me, and somebody walked me through that process. And they said to me, you got to take your GRE. And I was like, what's that? I don't know what that is. How do you take that? And so they explained to me what it was, how to take it. And I was panicking a little bit because I'd been out of college for a little while. And I was worried that my scores wouldn't be good enough to get in. But I ended up taking it. I took it on the computer. It was when they first started doing it on the computer, and you could take it either way, but that was the quickest way to get my scores. And I remember coming out of there, and my knees were shaking because I had so much writing on it, and it was also intimidating. But I did well, and I got into the university. And so we have a tuition scholarship that's given to students of the Miami Nation if they get in and participate. But I ended up getting a graduate assistantship, a teaching assistantship in the history department. So I didn't have to take that scholarship, and that could go to somebody else. So that is how I got into graduate school. And they didn't have a PhD program at the time, so I was in the master's program. And I can say without a doubt that it literally changed the trajectory of my life. I would not be where I'm at today in the role that I'm at with a PhD at one of the largest university systems in the United States, the largest in Texas, in the role I'm in, if I had not had that phone call from my chief and the help from Miami University to walk me through that process to get in.
So I'm assuming you graduate with your master's in history?
I did. I got a master's in history and a certificate in women and gender studies.
So what took you from your master's program to New York, where you got your PhD?
Well, through the course of my graduate work and the support of the faculty in the history department, I just fell in love. I fell in love with higher education. I fell in love with graduate school. It made my brain tingle in all the really good ways. And also it opened my mind. You know, I'm from small towns in Texas and in Miami, Oklahoma, and it opened my brain. And for the first time, I understood, you know, what Native American history was, even though that wasn't my focus in graduate school, because I wanted to travel to Europe. And so I focused on European history, but I was exposed to different ideologies. I was exposed to different religions. I was exposed to different people from different parts of the world. And I just got hooked. I was like, this is the foundation for making good change in the world. So from there, I was encouraged to apply to graduate schools. I was like, this is me. I've never felt happier in my life. So I ended up applying to several different graduate schools, and I ended up choosing New York. I went to Stony Brook. At the time, it was SUNY Stony Brook. Now it's called Stony Brook University. And I went in 2000. I showed up at Stony Brook and started my doctoral program there.
So what do you get your PhD in?
I got my PhD in history. I focused on, Europe in a kind of larger context, and then colonial Latin America was my teaching field. But my dissertation was on women and the building of civic identity and community in early modern Granada, Spain. So I focused on women in Granada, Spain. And I got to live in Spain for a while and do research in Spain, which is what I wanted. And looking back, I'm kind of like, why didn't I go into Native American history? But when you're talking to somebody who hasn't been out of the United States really, except to Mexico, because I grew up on the border, you know, I didn't want to travel to northeastern Oklahoma to study my people. I wanted to go live in southern Spain. And so I did. And then once I finished my dissertation and finished my doctoral program, I never did anything with Spanish history again. And I've only done Native American history and focused on education and things like that since. And women. Women have been a continual theme throughout all of the work that I've done.
So looking back, what is the value of your graduate education to you?
It really changed the trajectory of my life. It changed my life. It gave my, I had a mission already to support Native Americans, specifically my tribe, and to elevate women. But I didn't know how to do that. And higher education, graduate education in particular, gave me the vehicle through which to make the kind of change I wanted to see in the world. I firmly believe that education is transformational. I think that not everyone has the same access to education, to quality education. And I think that that's a problem. And so I believe that education is what creates opportunities for folks and allows them to take advantage of those opportunities.
So looking back at your undergrad, master's, PhD experience, what are some takeaways? What are the biggest life lessons you learned at that time?
Well, I learned that the system is not set up for folks who don't already understand the system. And when I think back in my undergrad, just briefly, I know you're asking about graduate school, but in my undergrad, for example, when I started at UT, which was bigger than my hometown, it was 50,000 students, and my hometown was like 30,000. No one explained to me, what discussion sections were, for example. And so I went through the first 6 weeks of my courses, not knowing I had to go to the discussion courses. I thought those were optional. And as an introvert, I was fine going to the library and doing my own thing. And then I realized, oh my gosh, I was supposed to be going to that, and that's where I was supposed to be taking my tests. And so, you know, that was a hard lesson to learn. So I realized that the system isn't always clear to folks who didn't come from that, who didn't already have someone to help guide them through that. And that was the same thing for graduate school when I was trying to apply, et cetera. I also learned that just because something is fair, you know, fair isn't what actually happens frequently. And that was a really hard lesson for me to learn, that fair doesn't make things so. And it isn't always the way things are going to go. Life is not fair. Homeostasis is not by nature equitable, but homeostasis is what everything kind of gravitates towards, and that the world really needs champions. And I decided that I wanted to be that champion, even though I've been sometimes slow to catch on to the underlying rules of the game in particular instances. And I really, when I do latch onto it, I'm like, oh my gosh, if I didn't understand that, I bet other people don't. And so I've tried to be a champion in making these things more transparent to others.
So you graduate with your PhD. Take us through linearly how you end up in your current position from then to now.
So I left my graduate program for many years, and I did that for a variety of reasons. Partly because I think my dissertation advisor and I kind of grew apart, weren't always on the same page. And I just had some challenges moving through my dissertation. It's also when the Great Recession of 2008 hit, and I had moved back to Austin because New York was ridiculously expensive, and I was working all the time and wasn't able to work on my dissertation. So I moved back to Austin. So I ended up leaving my program for a few years, and then decided that I really wanted to go back and finish. And I'm so glad I did. So I finished in 2015, and I was already working for an organization called E3 Alliance as the director of student success. So I've always worked in education in some shape, form, or fashion, and usually working with highly at-risk students. And then I moved into E3 Alliance, where I was doing a lot of systems change work, using a collective impact model for change. And I loved it, and we're very data driven. And I kind of was just like, wow, where have you been all my life? Collective impact, systems change. And so I worked there for several years, and I got my PhD during that time. And then I was giving a presentation. I don't even remember what it was about. And somebody from UT Systems saw me. I ended up connecting with her and learning about, wow, you know, there's work like what I'm doing. I was doing this at the regional level. I could be doing this at the state level through a system. I didn't even know what a university system was. And then a position came up for assistant vice chancellor for academic affairs. And I didn't even know what a vice chancellor was. I didn't know what a chancellor was. And so I remember Googling that, and, you know, here I am, I have a PhD, I'm doing really great work. And I'm like, I don't know what that is. But I looked at the job posting, and it was tough competition. I know lots of folks who actually were also applying for this job, all amazing human beings, would have been great in the job, in the role. I ended up getting this role. But, you know, people frequently ask me, like, how did you get to where you're at? And I was like, it was very circuitous. And I always followed my passion. I always tried to meet people and learn from them. And I was just fascinated with she's now my former boss, and now she's my colleague, but she was my boss for many years, who I met doing my E3 Alliance work. And she was just so brilliant. She still is. I still learn from her every day. And I always tried to take advantage of these opportunities where I'd meet these people and I'd learn from them. I'm always a learner, always a learner. And sometimes I'm an expert, but I'm always still a learner, even while I'm an expert in certain subject matters. So that's kind of how I got here. It was circuitous. I started at Communities and Schools for Central Texas. I built along with a colleague there, a college access and success curriculum for highly at-risk students, moved to E3 Alliance as a director of student success, and then I moved into this role and I've been here almost 8 years, and I love it.
Wonderful. Okay, so now we're gonna move a little bit past just your immediate journey, and then can you share a personal experience where you had to overcome a significant challenge in your journey to higher ed?
I mean, I think that there's always challenges that you're always having to overcome. One was just not coming from this world, and I don't think that our systems, particularly in higher ed, which is kind of interesting, are they're built for people who already understand the system. And when you don't have any point of reference for that, I think that's really challenging. And so I remember when I got my PhD, even so I was, I can't even remember how old I was. I can't even, I got it in 2015. So it's about almost 10 years ago. So I was already, 40 years old. And I remember thinking when I passed when I had to do my defense, and I was like, okay, I did it, I got it, but I didn't really believe it until I saw it on my record. And then I remember thinking, did they make a mistake? Do I really have a PhD? And so I guess what I'm trying to say is that I've always struggled with imposter syndrome, as do many women. And then tack on the fact that I'm Indigenous and I'm just a little bit different in that regard. And then I'm also queer. And so you add that on, I feel like all three of my intersecting identities as a woman, as an Indigenous woman, as a queer Indigenous woman, has always kind of made me just a little different. And also being a first gen, I've just kind of struggled with some of that in general. So, I know that you're talking about maybe a particular instance, but I would say that it's all of that kind of combined has made this both a challenge, but also became the reason why I do what I do.
How have you navigated and dealt with gender bias and stereotypes throughout your career?
This one's an interesting question. I think that early on in my career, I am 51 years old, approaching 52. And so I've been thinking a lot about how I've been viewed has changed as an older woman. When I was younger, I was, I think, viewed as the ingenue in some senses. You've got this young, spunky, smart, bright woman who's working on, doing this. And so people were cheerleading me like, we hope you make it. We're so proud of you. Not that people aren't proud of me now, but, and not cheering for me. But I will say that at some point that kind of changed, and I can see younger women in our offices and through the work that I do get shown a spotlight in a way that older women don't. So people can be like, wow, she's brilliant and young and beautiful and making her way in the world. And then you've got these older women where you could just see the kind of the tone shifts, the rooting for them shifts, and it definitely becomes something that you're having to work against versus working for you. So I've seen it in my own life where being a young woman, a young Indigenous woman, has worked for me. But I've also seen it and then it shifted as I've gotten older, because it is definitely a different situation for older women. But I've also seen it when I was younger and as a woman. I've been frequently talked over. I still get talked over sometimes. I can say something in a meeting and then someone else will say it, usually a man, and they're like, yes, that's exactly right. And I'm like, I literally just said that. I literally just said that. And this is, we've talked about it before, some of my female colleagues and I, where that is a kind of a norm. My wife also experiences this. I think that our office now is predominantly female. I don't see it happening as much, but in the past, I have seen that happen. I also think as an Indigenous woman, I try not to be the first person to speak. I want to hear what other people have to say. And culturally, that is right in line with the ways in which we lead. You know, you don't have to be the loudest, the first, the most adamant. A leader in my culture is one who is measured and who has listened to all the option and then weighs in. And so I pursue it that way. And so that is not the way we lead. We lead off of it, where what we value in terms of leadership is a very male, I would say, white, very, you know, just a very like white male dominated form of leadership is what I'm trying to say. And so when you don't pursue it that way, if you're trying to be more collaborative in nature to start off, not that men aren't collaborative, you're not treated the same way. And I think that frequently women approach leadership and collaboration in slightly different ways.
What advice would you give to other women aspiring to break through barriers in the field of higher ed?
I would say to reach out and form networks, engage in networks. I think, you know, we have, it's a subsidiary of ACE. We have the Texas Women in Higher Education Network, and that's a really great place to be, because you see women of all different levels and all different roles within higher ed. They're supporting each other and learning from each other and sharing. I also am a firm believer in mentors. And I think that sometimes we feel very, we're afraid to reach out and tell somebody, you know, will you mentor me, or can I have weekly conversations so I can learn from you? And I think that we need to be doing that. We need to be supporting each other. And you know, and maybe your mentor is not even another woman. Maybe it is a man. So I've heard that can happen. I frequently usually have female mentors of all different kinds and different areas. But I think that that's really, really important. And so I encourage women to not try to compete with each other and instead try to lift each other up. I think that goes also, and this is very unpopular for many people, but being very transparent with your salary. I mean, my salary is public record, but I don't shirk away from that, because I think when we hide what people make, that's when you can get pay disparities. And I'm all for everybody talking about what their salary is, because I also find myself in a position to advocate for other people. And I do. And I think that that's an important thing to do. You need to advocate for other people, not just for yourself.
So I'm going to jump ahead because you talked about mentorship. And so how has mentorship played a role in your own leadership? But you touched on it, but just if you can expand how it's played a role in your own development.
I think that because I came from a place that was not as familiar with higher ed, I am always seeking out, you know, and I think that's my personality anyway. If I don't know how to get somewhere, I ask questions. I will sit and ask everybody on every street corner if I have to figure out how to get to where I need to go. And I do that with people as well. I'm very genuinely interested in other people and interested in their own journeys. And sometimes I'm in a position to help them, and sometimes they're in a position to help me have better insights into who I am, what I do, how I do it, both in terms of getting praise, but also critical feedback, constructive feedback that helps me become a better version of myself. And so I've always sought that out. And so I'd say it's played a big role. My thesis advisor at Miami University is still somebody I turn to, and I still, want to make her proud of me and what I've done, but also to turn around and give her credit for what I've done. So frequently when I give public speeches, I make a point to thank my mentors because I did not get to where I'm at. I mean, in fact, I know for 100% I did not get to where I'm at just because of me. I think I play a role in it, of course, but I had a lot of people helping me along the way. And I still rely on their insights and their friendship and their cheerleading, particularly when I put myself out there. I frequently go beyond my comfort zone and try to be bold in what I'm doing. And when you do that, sometimes you then have self-doubt, like, did I make the right decision? Did I push too far? And it's good to have people to be a sounding board to help you continue to be that disruptor that you want to be. But you can't always do it alone. You need to have people behind you supporting you, saying, you know what, you're doing a good job, and just keep doing what you're doing.
In your role or roles, how have you approached leadership with innovation and forward thinking?
I think that I learned my lessons around leadership from my indigenous culture. And I believe very deeply in building the bench and ensuring that you have diffused leadership. And so I might be leading an initiative, and I might be solely responsible for that initiative, but I do try to empower people who are working with me to take ownership and leadership and be able to make some decisions, even if I might not 100% agree with how they're doing it, but they're coming to the same end. I let them do that, and I empower them to do that. And I think that that's really important. In my culture, becoming a leader, you are called to service. It is not your right to be a leader. Instead, you are deemed a leader because of your value and service to your community. I take that into the work that I do here as well. And I try to be of service to the community in my office and our constituents and stakeholders. So I really try to approach it that way. I also, as I mentioned, I do systems change. And so systems change is never based on one person. It is about actually building that bench, building the buy-in, ensuring that everyone has come to a common understanding of the problem, and then work together to co-create solutions. So I try not to impose anything. Instead, I try to lead the facilitation and the creation of solutions that will have staying power to make the kind of change we want to see in education and in the world.
Why do you believe in the power of sharing personal stories, and how has storytelling impacted your own journey?
I think that storytelling is how I got to where I'm at. I am a very mission-driven individual. And, I told my story earlier about my chief calling me. I wouldn't be where I'm at today had that not happened. And it helped me to understand my own culture better, where I was being called to be of service to my community. And I took that challenge and I ran with it. And so for me, my story is completely interwoven into everything that I do. You had asked a question previously about, how have you challenged traditional norms and reshaped the culture within your academic community? Well, that is my story, right? I'm a tribal citizen. I'm an Indigenous higher education administrator. I am a queer woman. Well, all of these intersecting identities make me a very rare breed, and really cannot be completely isolated from the work that I'm doing. It's completely interwoven into what I do, and also how I approach the work that I do and my leadership. And so I just don't see how I can or even should disentangle my story from the work that I do, because my story is my mission.
And so just to build off of that, because your mission is inspiring and your journey is so unique, how do you think that will inspire and empower the next generation of women leaders, maybe specifically who have Indigenous backgrounds?
Well, I want to just share a little bit of data really quickly. So,
Sure.
in 2021, the National Center for Education Statistics did a survey on how many American Indian, Alaskan Native faculty at degree-seeking post-secondary institutions there were in the United States. And based off of that, they found that there was less than 0.5% of faculty in these post-secondary institutions were Native American or Indigenous. Let me just say that again, less than 0.5%. And that's just the faculty. And I don't even think that they're measuring higher education administrators. And so I think that that number is even smaller, if you can even get smaller than that, of Indigenous higher ed administrators. And so I just want to say, and I hope this inspires people, as a higher ed administrator, I am frequently at the giving end of resources, whether that is funding for a Native American graduate summer institute to help other Indigenous graduate students learn the ropes and that kind of hidden curriculum around academia, understanding publishing and proposals and all of that kind of stuff. But I'm also a convener. I also do a lot of policy work. And so the point I'm trying to make is that if we don't have diverse people at the decision-making table, and just to point out, I'm not always at that table, but if we don't have women, more diverse women, women from different backgrounds, because women are not monolithic. If we don't have that at the table, then we are not going to be representing, or we're not going to get that representation at the decision-making table to represent those interests. So I firmly believe, I want more women faculty, 100%. I want more Indigenous female faculty. I want more Indigenous faculty. I want all of these sorts of diverse faculty in there, because we also know that that helps students from those backgrounds. But I also would encourage folks to go into higher education administration, because we have an ability to have an impact at a greater level, sometimes at an institutional level, sometimes at a state level, or at a system level. And we need to have more folks at that level making decisions over financial resources, human resources, policies, procedures, programs, and also just showing that you too can be where I'm at. If I got here, you can get here. And I'm always open. And just for anybody who's interested, I would love to talk to you. If you have questions about what it's like to be a higher education administrator at my level at a university system at this size, please reach out to me. If you're Native American, man or woman, or a they, them, like, call me. I want to talk to you about this sort of thing. So I just hope that my being very open and out and very outspoken will help others understand that this is something they can also do, and it is worth doing.
Okay. So the next couple questions are fill in the blank.
Okay.
Women in higher education are
Powerful and frequently what is the word I'm looking for? We are frequently underestimated.
higher education continues to be relevant because
Education opens up our minds. It helps us to understand each other better, understand ourselves better. It helps us to realize that our world, our society, our community, our family are all rooted in a broader context. And it's a context with histories and a context which gives deeper meaning to our present.
the perceived value of higher education is
The perceived value of higher education is unfortunate at this point in time. And I think that the true value of higher education is misunderstood frequently.
10 years from now, blank will be the norm in higher education.
Flexible formats.
I do this work because
It is my passion. It is my mission. And I truly believe that it helps improve people's lives and the world in general. You can't have an informed democracy without a strong foundation, educational foundation.
what is a book you wish everyone would read?
One of my favorite books is The Names by N. Scott Momaday.
If you weren't a leader at your current institution, what would you be doing?
I would be researching and writing because it's one of my favorite things to do. And I always have a lot of different projects in the works. I have one in the works right now on the Quapaw Superfund cleanup in Pitcher, Oklahoma. Check that out. Very fascinating. Or wait for my article to come out. But if I wasn't doing that, I love archaeology, and I do archaeological digs on the side just as a hobby.
Favorite candy or snack?
I don't really have a favorite candy, but I will say I like salty. Right now, I think what I would say is salt and vinegar popcorn is my favorite.
And then favorite word?
Mission.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining me today on this project. And I love your story. I love your background, and I love how inspiring you are for so many different people. And so thank you so much for being here today.
Happy to. Thank you.